environmentalism as a backdoor way to get in socialism, to get in more government, because they hold it as the solution. And of course, they blame climate trades on capitalism. So it's greedy corporations that are causing the climate change. They're destroying the planet just to make a buck. And so it's the government that's going to save the planet. And we're going to do it with socialism, but don't mind that. Just, we're going to save the planet. And it works. But I think COVID-19 is even better, right? I mean, climate change is going to take a back seat to COVID-19, right? Because I think this is a threat that people can see more clearly. I think there's still a lot of people that didn't necessarily buy into the whole climate change, or whether or not it was man-made, or how it would impact us, or if we could even do anything about it, right? Even if we changed our lifestyle and the rest of the world didn't, it wasn't even going to matter. But I think this COVID-19, this is a threat that a lot more people can appreciate, wrap their arms around, and really understand, because they've heard stories, people have died, right? And now we've had all of this, scare tactics, fear mongering about this particular disease, that a lot of people are very, very nervous about catching it. And you've also created a situation where a lot of people now are financially benefiting from the disease because they're not having to work, or they're not having to pay rent, but they're getting checks from the government that are bigger than the ones they used to earn when they worked honestly and got the check from their employer. So you're creating a big government threat, right? Or a big threat for the government to protect us from COVID-19, right? This pandemic, we're all going to get sick and die, right? Forget about climate change. That's going to kill us eventually. COVID-19 is going to kill us right now. And so we really need socialism. We need complete government control. You have to surrender all of your rights to the government in order to be safe from this disease. And people are buying into it, especially if you're also bribing them at the same time. Hey, give government all this power, surrender all your liberties. And by the way, you're going to get $2,000 a month. Oh, and your wife's going to get $2,000 a month, and your kid, you guys are going to make a lot more money. Just make this deal with the government. Just give up your freedom and your liberty, and you're going to make all this extra money, right? And people are dumb enough to buy it. So I think the left is going to milk this crisis as long as they can. They want to delay any kind of so-called reopening as long as possible. They want to elongate the crisis so they can have a bigger opportunity to grab more power and deny more individual liberty, and to get more and more of the socialist agenda through Congress. Now, some of the Republicans may, be against this. They may stop this from passing while Trump is president. But obviously, if the Democrats can keep the crisis going, keep the fear alive long enough to elect Biden and a Democratic Senate, then all of this stuff is going to pass in 2021, right? All this stuff that the Republicans are blocking because they have the Senate, right? Assuming they continue to block it, which I'm not sure they will, but whatever they do block will be unblocked when they lose the Senate, right? And if, we still have the fear, right? Because this COVID-19 is really allowing the socialist agenda to gain even more traction. It gives the left a very, very easy lane, right, to divert people into about this. And so they're going to keep playing this up. And it's a very, very scary time, not just because of the economics of it, but the politics. And the politics are ultimately going to drive the economics, because the politics are going to make it worse. They're going to put more pressure on the Fed to print even more money. In fact, today there were, 2 or 3 different guys from the Fed that came out and talked today. And they were trying to kind of downplay the expectation of negative Fed funds, which the markets now have priced in for early 2021, negative Fed funds rate, first time ever. And you have some Fed guys that were saying, look, we really don't like negative rates, really don't want to go there. So they didn't basically draw a line in the sand and said it's never going to happen. But they did, indicate that they didn't think it was a good idea, right? But they didn't take it off the table. But then Donald Trump came out and he tweeted, and he said that we should not turn down this gift of negative rates. Like, if we're lucky enough to be blessed with the gift of negative interest rates, we should not look that gift horse in the mouth. We should just take the gift and be grateful to have it, right? As if, this is free money. And, from Donald Trump's perspective, right? As a debtor, right? He borrows a lot of money. He uses a lot of leverage in his personal life to build his real estate empire. But so he always thinks about things from that perspective, from that vantage point. And so from the point of view of somebody who's always borrowing money, low interest rates, negative interest rates are a gift. Why are they a gift? Because the lender is being paid to borrow. You're actually being given money to borrow money, right? You're not having to pay to borrow. You're being paid to borrow. So that payment is really a gift. You're getting that money for free. All you have to do is borrow. In fact, you don't have to do anything with the money. You can borrow it and just hold the cash and just give it back, right? You don't have to take any risk. You just get paid, right? So it is a gift. And Donald Trump is like, hey, why should we turn down a gift? Let's just be humble and accept the gift, right, from the money gods. Except it's not a gift for everybody. It's a gift for some people. But who is on the losing end? Who is giving that gift? Involuntarily, I might add. And those are the lenders, right? If people are getting the gift of negative interest rates, who is giving them that gift? The people who are paying the negative interest rates. That would be the saver. So the saver is being punished. So is everybody in America a debtor? No, there are some net savers here. There are people who are having money taken away from them so that others can get a gift. So it's not a gift. And especially if the only way to keep interest rates negative is for the Federal Reserve to print a lot more money to buy up the bonds into negative territory, because no, right-minded person would use their own money to buy negative yielding bonds and give a gift to the U.S. government. So if the Fed is one that's going to give that gift, well, beware of central bankers bearing gifts, because where is the gift coming from? They're printing the money. They're creating inflation. They're stealing your purchasing power. So for Donald Trump to say, hey, these negative interest rates are a gift, yeah, well, what about higher prices? Right? That's going to be the other side of that. We have to create inflation to give debtors a gift. And we do that at the expense of savers, but now we've destroyed the value of everybody's paycheck. So all the people who work for salary and wages, now their paychecks have been diminished in value so that people who are in debt can get a gift. So Trump needs to understand that negative interest rates are a wealth transfer, but more importantly, by distorting the free market and leading to less than optimal decisions and allocations of resources, negative interest rates are bad for the economy. So the overall economy is weakening. Even if there are some people benefiting at the expense of others who are losing, everybody is a net loser, because the people who suffer more collectively than the people who gain, because we are diminishing the economy. We're making it less efficient and less productive. And so we are lowering everybody's living standard collectively. Yes, some people's living standards may go up while others, go down, but the overall standard, if you just took the average, is going to be going down, and negative interest rates are helping to drive that. But Donald Trump is basically trying to browbeat the Fed and back them into a corner where we're stuck with negative rates, because Trump wants negative rates because, again, he thinks they're great. He thinks maybe negative rates are the key to his reelection, right? If we can just get rates low enough that we can put a lot more juice into the economy, and he can be reelected. In fact, I was listening on the Sunday shows. Stephen Mnuchin was out there, Treasury Secretary, and he was talking about refinancing the national debt, right? That he's going to refinance the debt because it's a great time to refinance debt because interest rates are at historic lows, and this is a great opportunity, and this is going to be great for the American taxpayer. We're going to save the taxpayer all this money because we're going to refinance this debt. Well, first of all, if you wanted to save the taxpayers money, don't go into debt. Stop running up these big debts if you're concerned about saving the taxpayer money, right? No one in Washington gives a damn about the taxpayer. But putting that to coincide with the final day of the first quarter for the markets, but we had some connectivity issues here in Puerto Rico, and I lost internet. I actually had two services, and neither one of them was working. So finally got everything up and running, and so I'm doing the podcast today. Oh, but let me, I got to get something out of the way first. A lot of people have been waiting a long time for this, but and I thought I would never actually, do this. I mean, it's it really is a major epiphany for me to have to admit that I was wrong for all these years. But I finally seen the light. You guys, I mean, all these text messages and emails, they finally worked because I seen the light and I am buying Bitcoin. Gold, forget about gold. You're right. It's old school. I mean, it's too clunky. It's too heavy. I want something with real value for the digital age. I finally, I was stuck in this mind frame, because I'm an old guy, I'm set in my ways, and I just couldn't, get with this new technology. It just took a long time for it to really sink in. I mean, some of you guys, you got it right away, but it just took a long time. Now I'm 60 years old. And, so my brain doesn't work quite as rapidly as you 20-year-olds, right? So you were able to figure this out, quickly, but it just took me some time. I had to watch Bitcoin get all the way up, to 70,000, although it's pulled back right now. It's 28,000, something like that. But, I'm buying. You guys got me. So selling my gold, and I'm recommending that everybody who follows me do the same thing. Anyway, April Fool, if you believe that. Now, I know somebody is going to try to take what I just said as my April Fool joke, and they're going to cut it, and they're going to put it up on the internet as if it wasn't a joke, because that's how you Bitcoin guys operate. You like to take things out of context and misrepresent stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, you'd have to be a real fool to believe that I would be foolish enough to buy Bitcoin. Now, yeah, Bitcoin had a great quarter, and I'm going to get to that, but enjoy it while you can, because it's not going to be repeated. Because the real fools this April Fool Day were the people who were buying all these tech stocks during the first quarter, including cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, all this risk stuff got bid up in the first quarter of 2023. A lot of people got caught off guard by the strength that we had in risk assets in the first quarter, right? I mean, the NASDAQ, in fact, the NASDAQ had its best quarter since the second quarter of 2020. It was up 17%, I believe, on the quarter. And the reason that the NASDAQ did so well back in the second quarter of 2020, that's when the Fed, went back to QE. That's when they slashed interest rates back to zero because of COVID. Now, the market sold off early on when COVID first got started. But once the Fed went to zero and launched QE, infinity for QE4, that caused the NASDAQ to snap back very sharply. And so you have to go back then to find a quarter where the NASDAQ was as strong as it was in the first quarter of this year. Now, of course, the NASDAQ went way down. It was down about 30% for 2022. So big move down. It's not that crazy that we had a snapback. Plus, I think a lot of people were probably short a lot of these tech stocks going into the year. Certainly people who were short these stocks made a lot of money on those shorts in 2022. And so a lot of them were probably still there in 2023. And the expectation, of course, was that the Fed would keep hiking rates. And in fact, it did. We had 75 basis points of rate hikes during the first quarter of 2023. So that is what the markets had expected. And all of that, of course, had been bad for tech stocks. But the reason we got the sharp turnaround is because of the economic events, and most particularly the onset of the 2023 financial crisis that really changed the mindset. And I think even prior to the onset of this financial crisis, you were starting to see a bid in the tech stocks based on the idea that the tightening cycle was coming to an end. Yes, maybe the Fed was going to ratchet up rates a couple more times, but it didn't matter because the lion's share of the work had been done. And we were now on the cusp of another easing cycle. The Fed was soon going to be cutting rates. And of course, quantitative tightening would eventually give way to another round of quantitative easing. And so investors wanted to get ahead of that. Remember, the markets look forward. So they're looking beyond the last few rate hikes to the first rate cuts. And not just the first rate cuts, but the many, many rate cuts that are likely to follow, as well as the return to quantitative easing. And I think that is what is responsible for the big rise in the NASDAQ. And if you look at what happened with the Dow, for example, the Dow was barely positive. In fact, it may have been negative up until the last day of the quarter, because the Dow was up 400 points on Friday, and the Dow only gained 0.4% for the entire quarter. So I think all of that gain was attributable to Friday's rise. So, but for that rise, the Dow might have had a negative quarter. But the S&P 500 was up about 7%. And what powered the S&P was the tech stocks that are large components of the S&P. Certainly other sectors of the S&P, like the financials, did extremely bad, right? The financials got clobbered, especially at the latter part of the quarter. But the tech stocks were strong enough that it outdid the damage done by the financials. But if you look at, let's say, the Russell 2000, which doesn't have nearly as much tech as the S&P or the NASDAQ, obviously, that index was only up 2.3%. So not nearly as big a bounce. Now, I didn't participate as an investor. I didn't own much of these tech stocks. Actually, I did own some of the Asian stocks. I had some tech stocks in Asia. Some of them are in our funds. So we caught a bit of the tech rally, but we're way underweight tech in general. But where we were able to participate was in the gold stocks, because the gold stocks had a decent quarter, not a spectacular quarter, but they had a decent quarter. The GDX was up 13% on the quarter, and the juniors actually didn't even do as well. They were up about 10% on the quarter. Now, for those of you who are shareholders of the Euro-Pacific Gold Fund, we actually did a little bit better during the quarter than both of those index. The Euro-Pacific Gold Fund was up 14.2% during the first quarter. So not nearly as much as the NASDAQ, although actually not that far behind, 17% versus 14%. So almost as good as the NASDAQ, but a lot better than the S&P, and certainly even more better than the Russell 2000 or the Dow. And what I think should be going on right now is more people who are buying these tech stocks should actually be buying gold stocks instead, because I think the gold stocks are the new tech stocks for this new easing cycle. The people who are buying tech stocks all quarter were correct in their judgment that we were coming to the end of the tightening cycle, because we were. And they were correct to anticipate that there would be an easing, which there already has been. I mean, the Fed has already acknowledged that it's probably not going to hike much, if at all. And whether they want to admit it or not, they're back to quantitative easing. Although this week on Thursday, when they reported the balance sheet, it actually shrank again by about 25 billion. So we didn't have a third week in a row of an expansion. There was a little bit of a contraction, but I think that is the exception, not the rule. I think going forward, we're going to see the balance sheet continue to expand. Every once in a while, there may be a weekly contraction, but the direction now for the balance sheet is up. But I think investors are wrong in thinking that this easing cycle is going to be good for tech stocks. I think they've got it wrong. The last easing cycle was great for tech stocks, but I don't think that we're going to repeat that. I think this time around, it's going to be gold stocks. And in fact, if you go back to the 2000 bubble that popped, and NASDAQ was down 80%, mostly because of those tech stocks, the tech stocks rebounded from 2002 to 2008 when we had the financial crisis. But the gold stocks did much better during that easing cycle, because the Fed moved rates down to 1% and then kept them there for a while and then gradually normalized. But during that entire cycle, the gold stocks actually did much better than the tech stocks. So I think the same thing is going to happen this time. It's not going to be the people in tech stocks are going to make money again like they did from 2009-ish all the way through 2021 or whenever that bubble finally peaked. It's not going to be the same, nor is it going to be the crazy days of the COVID lockdowns where all these tech stocks, went ballistic. Because what I think investors don't get is that inflation is the wild card.
State that your position on the housing market and how long refis can keep. State your position on the housing market and how long refis can keep going. Look, the refis are keeping everything propped up. And if it wasn't for the Fed going to QE infinity, the refi well would have run dry. I'm sure that it's all the Fed printing money that's making these refis possible at these rates. So, and that's just, that's just the road to a hyperinflation. That road is paved with a lot of these refis. Lowell B. I own 9 acres outside from a large commercial development. I plan to subdivide into commercial lots and do storage units. Should I sell and purchase silver and gold? Look, I don't know the dynamics on that, on those storage units. Look, I think demand for a lot of stuff is going to go down. So depending on what price you can get, but you should definitely buy some silver and gold if you don't have any. If you don't, you should buy some. I mean, everybody should have some. Now, if you already have some, how much more do you need? I already threw out a number of 5 to 10% of a portfolio. So if you're not at that level, you can certainly top it up. Eugene Maravev also asking me about Russian stocks. I already mentioned, I'm sure there's some great buys in Russia. I actually made a lot of money in Russian stocks in the late 1990s. I was buying stocks, Lukoil, Preferred, Surgutneftegas, Hurricane Hydrocarbons, which became Petrokazakhstan, which wasn't Russia, but it was in that area. And I was buying a lot of these stocks, and I forget some of the weird Russian names. And I was buying them in the late 1990s when oil prices were about where they are now. And then oil went up to $150 a barrel. And yeah, I made a ton of money on those stocks. That one, Hurricane Hydrocarbons, I bought it at $5 initially. It went down to 25 cents. Talk about a disaster. It went from $5 to 25 cents. And then it went from 25 cents to $55 and was bought out all cash. Takeover by, I think, China Petroleum. Paid $55 a share cash. No reverse splits, right? It was the same exact number of shares. So I had the same amount of shares at 25 cents. And I bought more on the way down, actually, personally. I had some clients that bought it. But I had the same amount of shares when it was at $55. And by the way, like a couple of years earlier, they declared a special cash dividend of $2 a share. So $2 was more than I paid for the stock. And I got it all back in a cash dividend before I ended up getting $55 a share for the stock that I basically got for free, because the $2 that I got in a cash dividend was more than my entire cost for the stock. But believe me, I made that money the hard way. How many people are going to ride a stock from $5 down to 25 cents? And of course, I've ridden stocks from $5 to 25 cents and then from 25 cents to zero. So they don't all work out that way. But this was an oil play. And so I'm sure there's some out there that they're going to do that again, right? That are going to have that kind of value, because people throw it all out. They throw out a lot of babies with the bathwater when times are bad. You just have to know which are the babies and which are the bathwater. Oh, just by the way, for the regulators too, because I went over that story, past performance is no guarantee of future success. And just because I hit a home run on that stock doesn't mean I'm going to hit it on every stock. In fact, I won't. That is a rare exception, but it's just an oil story that I wanted to relate from that time period. Okay. When talking about crypto, why don't I talk more about stable coins? Well, stable coins are fine, but that's not what everybody's buying. Nobody wants a stable coin because you can't make money in a stable coin. I mean, it's just stable, right? People want to get rich. That's what crypto is about right now, is getting rich. But look, if you have a cryptocurrency backed by gold, it's all fine. The problem is the government hates that. They're going to regulate the hell out of that. They don't want people using gold. That's the problem, right? They don't care if they use Bitcoin, because they know that's going to crash. And, but Bitcoin is not a threat to the global monetary system. Now, they don't like it if drug dealers and money launderers and terrorists and tax evaders use it, right? So they know that threat and they're going to clamp down on that. But they know it's not a threat to the monetary system, right? It's not like gold, right? If we had a convenient stable coin backed by gold, everybody would use it, right? And so that's why it would be a threat to the fiat monopoly. But not everybody is going to use Bitcoin because it's not practical to use it in commerce. You can't, as I said earlier, you can't price stuff and it's too volatile and it has no intrinsic value. Gold would actually work. That's why the government would be afraid of it. Bitcoin doesn't work. It only works in its mind to help people evade taxes. And so that is the problem that they see. And they're already going after that with regulations. That's what drove Goldmoney. Goldmoney wanted to offer cryptocurrency trading, and they did for a while until the regulators made it so expensive that they had to stop doing it. Right, so that's what happened and it was all the AML, the money laundering stuff that it became too expensive. We couldn't make any money because all the money was spent in compliance. Okay, Nolan Stout, $10. Which government departments should be eliminated and which should be kept? Well, it's real easy. Go back in the Constitution and see which departments are authorized, and pretty much those are the ones we need. I mean, most of them should be eliminated. We don't need most of these government agencies and departments. The federal government should be principally involved with national defense. Right? So we need a Defense Department. I don't think we also need Homeland Security. I think the Defense Department can cover the homeland, especially if we stop, meddling in so many, foreign problems with our military, that we would have resources to defend the homeland. That's what it's supposed to be. Yeah, we need a Department of the Treasury, not like the one we have now, to borrow money. I don't want to be that. I want a Treasury that's full, not a Treasury that's empty and that's loaded up with IOUs, but we still should have one. We should have a Secretary of the Interior, not to pay farmers not to grow food and stuff like that, but we do need to take care of that. I mean, I don't even know that we need a Commerce Department. I mean, all they've done is create problems. But if they did what the Constitution specifies, really regulating interstate commerce instead of interfering in interstate commerce and pretending that they have the right to regulate companies that engage in independent commerce, which they don't. The Supreme Court was wrong to expand constitutional authority to regulate the companies that engage in commerce instead of the commerce itself, which is all the Constitution empowers the federal government to do. But look, almost everything that happens in your state should be handled by the state government or by the people. That was the vision of the founding fathers. It was that federalist system of limited, small federal government where the power was retained by the people and by the states, sovereign states with a limited federal government, with gold money, sound money. The federal government was not given the power to print money. They don't have that power. All they can do is coin money, which is gold and silver. Because no state can make anything but gold and silver legal tender. The federal government is given no power to make anything legal tender, so it can't. So constitutionally, the only thing that can be legal tender in America is gold and silver, and the only thing the federal government can do is take that gold and silver and make it into a coin. But we need to get back to constitutional government. If we do that, we will create wealth unlike the world has never seen, because we have a lot more capital, we have a lot more technology, and a lot more know-how. Intellectually, as far as our technology, we're miles ahead of the founding fathers. We're way behind them when it comes to our economic understanding. So we don't understand economics as well as the people did 250 years ago, but we understand, physics and thermodynamics and, computer, quantum mechanics, all that stuff, right? We understand all the science more. We have more knowledge now than we had then. So capitalism, if we really embraced it the way we did back then, we can create more wealth faster today than they were able to do in the 19th century. The 21st century can explode with prosperity if we choose the right door. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm out here educating people. So we choose the door that leads to freedom and opportunity and prosperity. We don't choose the dark door to government, socialism, totalitarianism. That's where we're headed. Unfortunately, we're on that path. I'm trying to get us to veer from that path. I don't know if I could do it, but I need your help, right? We need to get this. This is a good podcast to start. Get people. You know, I had over 200,000. Let's see if we can get 1 million people. Look, this thing is going to go up on YouTube. This is my challenge. Let's get this thing to 1 million views. Share it with everybody you know and say, hey, sit down. You're at home. You got nothing to do. You're quarantined. Spend 4 hours. Listen to Peter Schiff answering these questions. Understand, right? Wake up, right? We're all living, in this fantasy world of the Matrix, right? And I'm trying to get people to take the pill that opens their eyes to reality, right? I'm like the Morpheus here. So spread this video and let's watch it. I mean, it would be great if we can get this. That's my birthday present. It's my birthday. Give me 1 million views, 1 million views on this YouTube video. I mean, I see little kids playing with toys that get 1 million views, right? This is valuable information I'm putting out there, and we need 1 million people to learn it. Okay, fractional reserve banking. I already talked about that. And Joe, what do you think about gas, oil stocks, utilities, tobacco stocks? They're getting killed. Look, interestingly enough, look at the U.S. oil stocks today. Look at the difference. Chevron down 8%. ExxonMobil down 4%. It's coming back. They were low. But look at European stocks. Total, a French company, is up 13%. That's one of the ones that we own, I know, in our portfolios. We own Royal Dutch. It's up 3.5%. So foreign oil stocks are up, right? And domestic oil stocks are down. And I think the valuations are much better. You look at the dividends, look at the yield, which obviously could come down now with oil prices. But the yields on the foreign stocks are much better. So if you're going to buy oil stocks, and I think we should be buying oil stocks, don't know where the bottom is. We definitely should be buying them. If you opened up an account with me today, I would buy you oil stocks. Tobacco stocks, yes, we have tobacco stocks. We own some tobacco stocks. I think there's great yields on these tobacco stocks. I'm not a smoker, and there's some people that, conscientiously tell us, I don't want to buy a tobacco stock. If that's your deal, we don't have to put a tobacco stock in your portfolio. But if you just want a good investment, personally, I think there's a lot of good dividend yield in these tobacco stocks. Utilities too. We have utilities. Telecom, we're overweight that sector. But again, I want to buy the value outside the United States. I don't trust the stocks in the United States. I don't trust this government. I don't trust the Biden government that's coming. I don't trust this Federal Reserve. There is massive political and economic risk. I think the United States right now is probably one of the worst countries in the world that you can invest in. I mean, now, it was a great place to invest during the bull market that spanned 10 years. And had you listened to me, I was saying this back then, I thought the U.S. was too risky. And as it turned out, with the benefit of hindsight, it wasn't. Now, you got the Russell 2000. It's just wiped out 7 years of gains in 2 weeks. So, that prediction is rapidly coming true. So if you wait a couple more years, it will be true. I think I will be proven right that the U.S. was the worst place to invest if you remained in there. But yes, we just had a period of time where the U.S. was the best place to invest. But remember, from 2000 to 2010, it was one of the worst places. All the markets did so much better. Foreign markets, emerging markets, commodities, gold, everything kicked the hell out of the U.S. stock market during that lost decade. Well, if you thought the first decade of the 21st century was lost, where do you see this decade? The 20s? Yeah, they roared in the 20th century, right? They are going to crash in the 21st century. Right? This it's going to be worse than the 30s were in the 20th century. So yeah, I mean, I ship the U.S. Market, and I'm bringing it to the safety of foreign markets, which I think offer a much better risk reward. Nothing's without risk. Everything you do is risky, including holding cash. In fact, personally, I think cash is among the riskiest things out there. I think what everybody thinks is safe is completely risky, because when you talk about the dollar being safe, treasury bonds being safe, they're only safe if you assume the dollar doesn't collapse. But the minute you assume that the dollar could collapse, if there's hyperinflation, then how can a treasury bond be safe? How can a CD be safe? It can't. It's only as safe as the currency is sound. And if we're printing it like crazy, if there's no limit to how much we're going to print, which is what Fed just said, Neil Kashkari on CNBC, on CBS on 60 Minutes last night, when you have the Fed announcing today, Q and Infinity, that they'll buy as many bonds as needed from mortgage backs to munis to corporates to treasuries. How can anybody
trying to sell? All that counts is your dividends, how much you're earning in dividends. But I know that gold stocks are going to be much higher in the future than they are right now. So I want the price to go down right now so I could buy more, right? If you had, you had a time machine and you had the price of a stock 10 years from now and you knew how high it was going to be, you would want it to go down before then because you just want to buy more if you know where it's going to be. Well, I don't have a time machine. I don't have the newspaper from 10 years into the future, but I don't think I need a time machine. This is so obvious that I can see it in advance. And so I'm so convinced that these stocks are going to be much higher in the future. I want them to go down now, even though I already own a bunch, because I'm still earning money. I have to invest it somewhere. I'm not going to spend it all. And so I want to buy more of these stocks. So I think we might get more of a pullback there, but not as significant as what I'm looking for in the overall stock market. Next, I want to talk, though, about the debt ceiling. That was the topic mainly of my last podcast. I talked a lot about the debt ceiling, brinkmanship, and all the political theater involved in the debt ceiling. Well, today, some of the actors came out and took a bow. The Republicans actually passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling. They're going to raise it by $1.5 trillion, which is nothing. I mean, maybe that'll buy them 6 months, right? I mean, because the deficits are over $2 trillion a year. So raising it by $1.5 trillion, they were doing that, years and years ago when we only had $400 or $500 billion deficits a year. When you're running deficits of over $2 trillion a year, a $1.5 trillion increase in the debt limit doesn't really get you much. Now, personally, I would just assume the debt limit not go up. I want the ceiling left so that we could really start dealing with the debt and paying our bills instead of, putting more of our unpaid bills on a credit card. Well, the Republicans have passed a debt ceiling increase, but the Democrats in the Senate are not going to pass it. And even if the democratically controlled U.S. Senate passed it, Biden ain't going to sign it, right? So it's dead on arrival. And the reason that the Democrats don't want to sign it is because they say it's heartless. They're slashing government spending. This is terrible, right? The Republicans are punishing America with this increase. We want to just increase the debt ceiling, just a clean bill to increase the debt ceiling, as if that doesn't punish Americans. Who does Biden and the Democrats, who do they think is responsible for repaying all this debt? It's not like Americans avoid being punished if we don't make them pay now, if we let them pay later, because they're going to pay more later. Increasing the debt punishes the American people who are on the hook for repaying that debt. So if we really want to do the American people a solid, we should not raise the debt ceiling. We should reduce the burden of debt that we are placing on them. But Biden and his buddies in the Democratic Party want to pretend that the average American, the middle class, is getting away with something. If we just keep increasing the debt ceiling, then the average American never has to cover the cost. Like these bills are just going to be paid, by Santa Claus or the man in the moon. No, the American public, the middle class, are responsible for all this debt. And so the responsible thing to do is to stop adding to that burden and deal with it. But the Republicans don't even do that because, first of all, there are no real cuts. The only cuts that are happening are in discretionary spending, right? So that means that all the non-discretionary stuff, Social Security, Medicare, national defense, none of the cuts apply to national defense, interest on the debt, none of that's getting cut at all. That's 70+% of the budget. So if you're not going to cut 70% of the budget, even if you cut the other 30%, you're not going to make much headway. But the other 30% doesn't really get cut. What the Republicans are saying they want to do is limit the increase in that spending. to 1% a year. Remember, I talked about how the government's version of a cut is you increase spending by less than you had planned on increasing it, and they call that a cut, right? Well, in reality, that's still an increase. It's just a smaller increase. Now, in a way, if you only increase discretionary spending by 1% a year, and if inflation is 6%, 7% a year, well, then in real terms, spending is being cut. And that would be the case. And the people who were getting these government benefits would feel the pain of the reduction in the real purchasing power of whatever money they were receiving from the government, because it wouldn't keep pace with the increase in the cost of living. So in a way, yes, it's a little bit of a cut, but it's not nearly enough to get us to where we have to be. As I mentioned in my last podcast, given the fact that we have over a $2 trillion annual budget deficit, in order to balance the books so that we stop burdening Americans with even bigger debt, which they have to repay with interest. So obviously, if you have to repay your debt with interest, it's more expensive than just paying for the spending right now. So either we have to cut spending by a third, right? 33% cut in everything, which includes Social Security and Medicare and national defense. And if you're not going to cut those, then you got to pretty much abolish everything else. You have to eliminate completely the discretionary spending. If you're going to take Social Security, Medicare, national defense, and put them off the table, well, you just got to get rid of everything else. And I don't even think that even balances the budget. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, you can raise taxes. It would take, I think, about a 40% increase in taxes to balance the budget. That's how much Americans are undertaxed relative to what the government is spending. Think about that. A 40% increase in every tax that you pay. So the Social Security tax would have to go up 40%, payroll taxes. Medicare tax up 40%. Your income taxes would have to go up 40%. That is an enormous increase. And of course, they might actually have to go up more than 40%. Because if you raised income taxes and payroll taxes by 40%, you would not get 40% more revenue. That would actually harm the economy. It would cause the revenue that you're taxing to go down. Incomes would go down if taxes went up that much. So in order to get an extra 40% in tax revenue, well, you might have to raise taxes by 50 or 60%. But again, that would destroy the revenue even more. I don't think it's even possible. How much they would have to raise taxes to balance the budget is so big that it can't ever work because of the economic impact and the adverse consequences those higher taxes would actually have on the very thing that you're trying to tax. So most of it is going to have to come from spending cuts, but real spending cuts. But the Democrats won't even sign on to these tiny spending cuts that the Republicans are proposing. Biden and the Democrats are saying these are draconian, these are heartless, this is going to destroy America. We're not going to vote for this. Instead, we'd rather destroy America with debt rather than destroy them with spending cuts. Anyway, it was for Trump to beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. Anyway, what I want to wrap up this podcast, though, talking about is Tucker Carlson out at Fox News. You know, two of the guys whose shows I was on the most, Don Bongino and now Tucker Carlson, are both gone from Fox. I used to do both their shows. Now, maybe that means Laura Ingraham is next. Hopefully she sticks around because she's the only person left on Fox News who has me on. Now, I go on Fox Business. I go on Liz Claman's show. I go on Charles Payne's show. So that's another network. But Fox News, which has a bigger platform, there were three shows that I go on, and now two of the hosts are gone. But by far, I think Tucker Carlson was not only the best host on Fox, he was the best host on any news network, cable or broadcast. He was by far the best. In fact, I talked a lot about his recent podcast about the dollar's reserve currency status. But more than that, I mean, he called out all the hypocrisy regarding the war in the Ukraine and COVID. I mean, so many things. And when they were doing the George Floyd stuff, and I mean, so many things, he had the guts to come out and speak the truth. When nobody else wanted to speak the truth, everybody else in the mainstream media wanted to be politically correct. They were kowtowing to all of that pressure. And Tucker had pressure because a lot of advertisers who would have advertised on his show, the number one show on cable news, not just the number one show on Fox, the number one show in all of cable, right? But some advertisers were afraid to advertise because they're worried that some left-wing nut is going to boycott them because Tucker Carlson is telling the truth. When you're telling lies and there's someone out there telling the truth, you got to silence that person, right? You want to be able to tell your lies and have other people not call you out, right? And he had a big soapbox to call out all these lies. And he had a lot of people, a lot of fans, myself included, who enjoyed watching his show because he was very unique. Now, of course, I'm like Tucker in that respect, but I'm just here on, Peter Schiff show. I don't have a Fox News platform. I'm not the host of a show like that. His audience is more than 10 times as big as my audience. And, it's easy for me to speak the truth. I mean, I gotta, give it, applause for Tucker because to speak the truth in that corporate environment, knowing what the consequences are, right? I'm my own, right? I mean, I can speak my mind. And yeah, maybe they ended up shutting down my bank. The media destroyed my bank because they didn't like what I said. But I can't get fired, right? I mean, because I don't have a boss, right? I'm just direct to my audience. I'm not dealing with a big corporate structure. But he was in that world. And even though he was with Fox, yes, Fox is Republican, but they're not libertarian Republican. They're, mainstream, George Bush, military industrial complex. They're not Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson pushed the envelope at Fox, right? And that's the reason that he was so hated. I mean, you look at all the people that are celebrating and popping the champagne because Tucker Carlson was fired. Look at all of his enemies, because his enemies, the people who were Tucker's enemies, those are the people that you want to be your enemies. When all those people are celebrating that you've been fired, Tucker was doing a good job. He was an important voice that needs to be heard. And it's a shame for Fox that they caved into the political pressure, because you don't know why they fired him. Yeah, they got this big lawsuit from Dominion that they settled, the defamation lawsuit, but that wasn't Tucker's fault. Tucker didn't do that. So I don't know what else was a catalyst, but I think the problem was they were worried about Tucker and the things that he says because of how honest he is at calling out the hypocrisy and the lies of the establishment, of which, Fox is part of the establishment. Now, they're not nearly as bad as CNN or MSNBC or ABC, CBS, NBC, all those, but they weren't Tucker. Now, they allowed Tucker. To their credit, Fox allowed Tucker to speak his mind for as many years as he did. But at some point, they must have decided that it was too much for them. But I think that this is going to end up being a loss for Fox News. It's not going to end up being a loss for Tucker Carlson, because there is a big market out there for what Tucker Carlson is saying. There are a lot of people. I mean, I tap into part of that market myself, so I know that it's out there, and I know that he can reach it. He doesn't need Fox News. He's got a big enough audience already, and Fox News certainly helped him cultivate that audience. I mean, I can imagine the size of the audience I would have if I had a multi-year run on Fox News. I mean, I think I could have a very successful program. Plus, he's got a whole bunch of writers and producers. I do it all myself. So I just make it up. I don't have people writing scripts for me and stuff like that. But I'm sure if I was up there on that big a soapbox, I'd have a big audience too. Maybe not as big as Tucker's. I don't know. But he's got a great audience that he wouldn't have had. But he can take that audience especially with the internet and social media, he doesn't need to sign a deal. I mean, there are other broadcasts. He could do One American News. He could do Newsmax. He could do something with the Daily Wire. But I think that he should just go out on his own. I mean, he could. I'd love to do something with Tucker, but Tucker don't need me. He doesn't need anybody. He can do it all himself. And I look forward to being a guest on the Tucker Carlson show whenever he starts producing it. In the meantime, I think Fox is going to lose a lot of viewers. There are people that are pissed off, and rightly so. I mean, my mother, I didn't put her up to it. My mother, who's a big fan of Tucker Carlson, she tells me, I'm never watching Fox again. My wife doesn't want to watch Fox either. It's like we can't turn on Fox News. My mom canceled her subscription to whatever. I forget what I don't subscribe to it, but my mom subscribes to some paid Fox Now, or I forget what it's called. But she says, I'm canceling it. And if my mother is doing that, I mean, I'm sure that lots of people's mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers are having a similar reaction. They're just really upset. They feel like Fox sold them out by firing Tucker, and they want to show their support for Tucker Carlson by, boycotting Fox. And, a lot of people that tuned in to Tucker Carlson's show, 8 to 9 o'clock, well, they watched 9 to 10, right? They stuck around. So Tucker's show and his popularity benefited the shows that came later. Well, now they're not going to get the benefit of Tucker's audience not turning the dial, because Tucker's audience isn't going to be there. And there are a lot of other alternatives to Fox News now, and other ways that people can get Tucker. So all the people that are out there that are so happy that Tucker Carlson is off Fox News, be careful what you wish for, because he may even be more effective and speak even more freely. I mean, imagine the stuff that Tucker Carlson said when he was still under that Fox News umbrella. Imagine what Tucker Unleashed is going to say. I look forward to that, and I wish Tucker Carlson Godspeed in his new adventure, in this next stage of his career, which I think will be the best yet. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening, and don't forget,